This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Grant and Calvin Watkins. Boys, it was another weird weekend for the Cowboys. Once again, they're on the roller coaster. All right, we're all on board now. We're ready to go. And then that game just looked like the worst of what they've been all year on defense. So before we get into all that, I want us to kind of briefly, Calvin, give us the update here on what has to happen for the Cowboys going forward here with the Eagles' overtime loss to the Chargers, in which, my gosh, poor Jalen Hurts, 2 turnovers on one play. Is that an NFL record? An interception and a fumble on the same play. That's just, or is technically is that considered the same play? Because once you turn it over, it's somebody else's ball. I don't know. Maybe that's a technicality I don't know about. But anyway, an all-timer for him. I guess he had 5 turnovers in that game. That's just awful. So looking forward now, both teams have 4 games left, right? And the Cowboys, Calvin, give us the Cowboys schedule.
Cowboys, with 4 games left, they got Minnesota this weekend. They got Minnesota, the Chargers, and back-to-back road games at Washington and New York to close the season. Cowboys are a game and a half back of Philly for first place in the division. Dallas has to win out. They can't afford any losses. Philly, they could lose maybe one more game, right? This weekend, the Eagles have Vegas at home, and then they got back-to-back road games at Washington, at Buffalo, and they close the year against Washington. So the Eagles can lose 1, maybe 2 games, and they'll be okay. But the Cowboys have to win out in order to win the division. To get to the wild card, it's a little more complicated, but the Cowboys lose tiebreakers to Carolina and Chicago and Detroit. So the best way for them to get in is to win the division.
I think the wild card is just out of the picture, right? I mean,
yeah, it was out of the picture, I think, for me, even before the loss to the Lions. I mean, that obviously made it worse because that's one of the teams ahead of you in the wild card race. And so that was, they needed to win the division. So they faced the Lions, and for what was it, 2.5 quarters, 3 quarters? They're hanging right in there. But then it all just blew up in their faces in the fourth quarter at that point. So Calvin, you were there. Give us your feel for how they played in that game. Did it feel like a give up? Were they just outclassed by a team that was, obviously Jahmyr Gibbs is a real playmaker. He's very fast. What was your take on that game and on that loss?
I think Detroit was just better than them, and the Lions didn't have all their pieces, right? They were missing, I think, 3 starters on defense, but when Jahmyr Gibbs came back, that was a whole nother dynamic. Playing 4 games in 18 days, I think it caught up to them a little bit. The Cowboys have never been the best of teams in the first quarter. I think they've trailed in their last 5 games at the start of the game, like they give up an opening possession for a score, or they're down 7-0 or 3-0 at the end of a quarter. So they didn't get off to a really good start. Defensively, I was very surprised at how poorly they played. They gave up 44 points, which was tied the second most allowed this year. Offensively, George Pickens did not have his best game. CeeDee Lamb suffered concussion, and they couldn't get the running game going. The offensive tackles were beaten up. So in a desperation game for both teams, because the Lions weren't in the playoff race neither. They were like in the hunt. In a desperation game where you needed to win, the Cowboys failed to show up. So, and you could say, well, it was the 4th game in 18 days, and I get all that, but no one cares. That's the schedule, and you got to fight through it. And they fought through it as hard as they could, but they couldn't win the game that they needed.
Yeah, I think it's being kind. You know, when you at this time of year, everybody's beat up, everybody's tired, and I get that whole thing. But you, at some point, your will has to overcome whatever physical limitation you have. As far as we're just worn out. It's one thing if you're injured. I'm not going to ever say that
Mhm.
you got to get over the fact that you're injured. But at some point, I just think that it looked like to me late in that game that it was like Tyler Breach can't do it. That's it. We're done. Um, and that kind of is the opposite of what the temperatures seem to be out there. As Joe Hoyt talked about it and how last week and about how Dak Prescott was talking about the confidence he had in this offense and just the vibe in the building and all of that. That had to have just sucked all the wind out of the Cowboys to play like that. So you mentioned George Pickens, and that became a viral after the game because of what Richard Sherman said about him at the beginning of the former Seahawks and 49ers cornerback, who said it just looked like he basically didn't care, that he was just kind of going through the motions. I don't think that Sherman cited it in particular, but there was a play where he was just jogging up the sideline, really wasn't looking for the ball, turns around, ball falls at his feet. He doesn't make much of an effort to get it. And then Pickens fired back on Twitter with a couple of choice remarks about Sherman and saying that you would think that a player or a former player would understand what we're having to go through in this type of situation. So Calvin, what was your take on that? Was George just getting a lot of attention, and so therefore that's just the best you could expect of him, or did you think that he just got a little frustrated because of the circumstances and just kind of just blew it off?
A little bit of both. He was getting a lot of attention. He had a corner and he had a safety following him around. But also, I rewatched the game again and I was watching him, and there was a lot of you could tell when he's not the first option, right? So he comes slowly off the line of scrimmage and he's just like moving around and he doesn't even look for the ball, right? There was a play. He draws a penalty, right? A pass interference call, and so the next play he just jogs down the line of scrimmage and they throw the ball to him and he's like, oh, so it's kind of like, what are you doing here, fella? So it was kind of like an effort thing in some ways. When he's not getting the ball, he's like, I'm okay. But when he is getting the ball, he's got all his energy and he's like ready to go. And you can't do that. You got to be the high energy all the way through. But the Cowboys are willing to deal with this because when he has a high energy, he's a productive member of society. But when he's not, then he is what you got, 4 catches or whatever it was on Thursday night.
Well, we also have what Michael Irvin said, and I shouldn't have left that out when I talk about what Richard Sherman said. Michael Irvin was very choice in his comments. He said, "I hope this doesn't blow our relationship, but you got to give an effort on every effing play. You
Mm-hmm.
got, and of course, and that's when I said, I believe it was last week, that Pickens to me is the most talented wide receiver the Cowboys have ever had. I didn't say he was the best. Michael Irvin's better, Drew Pearson's better. You can go down the line of people who are better just because of their production and their effort and what they did year in, year out, game in, game out. And certainly Michael Irvin was the epitome of that. Michael had probably limited physical skills, but his effort and preparation was off the charts. And so you can understand why he might be upset about that. But my question is, okay, you can put up with it this year because he's not making that much money, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, do you give this guy what was being talked about at least a $30 million contract? Do you give a $30 million contract to a guy that you're not sure if he's going to bust it every single play? I mean, isn't that the world's biggest mistake, to give a lot of money to somebody who A is either not a leader or B not somebody that you can trust to go out there and give maximum effort in practice, in the games, everything that you have to do. Evan, why don't you?
Haven't we been all over? We've been all over the map on this. We know that Pickens is immature and still has a lot of maturing to do. But I think if you go back and look at this podcast over the last month, leading up to the trade deadline, we were not opposed to the idea that the Cowboys had gotten max value out of George Pickens and should trade him for max value. Then he continued to play well. And we were like, maybe the Cowboys should sign him long term. Then he, was late for the Raiders. And that showed up as immaturity, but he still played great. So we've been all over the map. And I mean, I think from my perspective, when you have that much uncertainty, and maybe it is just week to week, but when you have that much uncertainty, it would seem if you've got any uncertainty, any legitimate uncertainty about that deal, boy, that would to me be a red flag and say, no, you can't you can't invest that kind of money. But boy, the talent is great when he shows up. And he had a bad game. I mean, he had a bad game all the way around. I don't know how much it detracts from what he's done all year. That's where I'm kind of in a little bit of a conundrum, because I don't know if this is something that's going to be a problem or if this was a one-off.
Well, look, it's not a one-off. I mean, this is what he did in Pittsburgh, right?
This is a one-off here.
It's a one-off here, but he's only been here for what, 9 games, 10, 12 games, whatever. So,
but that's the sample size you're going to have to make that call on, right?
Well, I know, but see, to your point about the schedule and how we said, well, before we were saying, well, the Cowboys are out of it, and so if they're out of it, they go ahead and just trade the guy, right? Well, then all of a sudden they're in it, and then he's a big part of that. Okay, so now we flopped over here to this side. My issue with it is that bad games are bad. Look, everybody has bad games. Stuff just happens. Like AJ Brown had a bad game. Last night, drops the ball in the end zone. Lets the ball go through his hands for an interception. But no one. I mean, you can question AJ Brown with the stuff he says off the field. But boy, he's a tough wide receiver who plays hard every game. It's to me, it's a lot more problematic when you just don't know what you're going to get from the guy mentally. Like, what's he going to do here? So I think, so Calvin, that's what I want to ask you, because you're out there with it all the time and you see what he's like, and you see he seems to be well liked by his teammates. I think that's all good. And I guess we thought maybe it's just a different environment here with the Cowboys than it was with the Steelers. Better quarterback, maybe better people around him. Maybe the head coach is a little more understanding and all those things. But if he's still showing symptoms of the same problem here, well, then I don't know that anything's fixed, is it?
I go back and forth on this, and I think we've talked about this. At first, I was like, you don't pay him because of what we just talked about. But I'm going to pay him because the talent is incredible, and not every team can absorb him, right? Not every team can embrace. He's late to meetings. He misses the team bus. Not everybody can deal with that. But the Cowboys can, because they have an infrastructure in place with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jones and Brian Schottenheimer that they could get him to the game and he can produce for you. But is that something that's going to last you for 5 or 6 years? Probably not. So when you sign him to this massive $30 million a year contract, you're going to give yourself an out in 2 years and say, we're done with you, right? Because he's not going to change, but you're just hoping to keep him where he is so he's a productive member on your team for as long as you can stand him. And if that's 2 years, great. When you get to that 3rd year, then you evaluate it and say, are we getting bang for our buck? And if not, then you let him go, right? Trayvon Diggs had a similar contract. They were going to let him go last year, but he hurt his knee, so they had to keep him. And now you're seeing all the stuff they're going through with Diggs just to get him on the field, right? And he's probably going to be gone in the offseason. So he is a talented player. You give him the money, and you just hope that in the next 2 years you get somewhere with him, because you're going to let him go because he's going to wear out his welcome.
Yeah, it's just like the old days with the Cowboys, isn't it? Here we go with the Cowboys taking on a troubled player who's talented. I mean, Jerry used to do that all the time, right? There was at least one guy on the roster every year. There's been a few years since he's really done this kind of thing, or it seemed like to me. So there's the talent is undeniable. There's no question about that. But
I don't know if I'd call Pickens trouble. I'm struggling with the word trouble. I think he's immature. I don't know if I'd call him troubled, but I think Calvin's point is great, right? The higher the maintenance, boy, you really got to be worth the bang for the buck on the field, and you can't have a critical game where you just don't show up like
Well,
he did.
when I say trouble, I don't mean that he's getting arrested. I don't mean that at all. To me, it's
Right.
trouble for it's trouble to me for your locker room. At some point, somebody's going to say, "Why is this guy doesn't have to follow the rules and all the rest of us do?" Yeah, he's really good, but
High
come
maintenance
on,
That's
yeah,
the whole
I mean,
high maintenance issue, right?
yeah, it's just a lot to have to deal with, and I don't know. I just think it's the worst look you can have on a field when a guy's not going all out and it's obvious. I mean, I just think that's the kind of stuff that fans are going to go, what the heck? And teammates the same way. And if it's this easy to frustrate him, right? You put two guys. Why wouldn't they put two guys on it? If you're that talented, why in the world wouldn't you? I'd rather put two guys on him than CD. You know, I think the more talented receiver, the more dangerous receiver.
But he
So
also had the one other thing that he had going against him on that night was that CD also wasn't on the field for the majority of the game. So, they were able to put much more attention on him, maybe than just more attention.
yeah, that's true. But that also tells you something, right? So, and he's talked about it, how much he loves playing with CD.
Right.
So, if you sign him, that means that, and I've proposed this before, what if you traded CD then, right? Well, then maybe you can't trade him. If Pickens is going to be this way, that he has to have CD along with him, then
He
to
needs
make
CD.
everything work,
He needs
then it makes
CD
it,
with him. Yeah.
yeah,
You
I mean,
can't have
and that's
him and Ron
expensive.
Flournoy. No, you cannot. Yeah.
No,
And I
I
think
mean,
both of you have answered the
that's
question.
expensive.
I think you've ultimately answered the question with all the hurdles you're talking about that the Cowboys or the other issues the Cowboys have to address to try and make this work long term.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, look, when he's right, he's helping you win games. He's a difference maker. I mean, it's not that he's just good and he piles up good stats. He's a difference maker.
Yeah.
I get all that. It's a conundrum. I lean towards no, just because of that happened. The great thing for them is they're getting a whole year, right, to find out. And I wouldn't have thought that was a good thing necessarily if you were thinking about keeping him. But looking at it now, yeah, I think it is a good thing. So we'll see what he does from here on out. Cal, is there anything else on the Cowboys we need to talk about? Do you got any injury situation here? Anything we need to bring up?
CeeDee Lamb suffered a concussion in Detroit, so he had 10 days off. We'll see if he'll practice later this week. Tyler Guyton, the left tackle, hopefully he can come back because they need him because the tackles look like a disaster in Detroit. So hopefully they can get him back. Your boy Trayvon Diggs, he's got his knee issues. We'll see if he'll practice this week. The Cowboys need Trayvon Diggs, but when you talk about the combustibleness of a player, Trayvon Diggs fits that with George Pickens. So, and Brian Schottenheimer has been like dancing through the tulips with these guys. He'll bench them for being late and then play them, and then he'll hug them after they make a great play. So he's giving them tough love and in a lot of different ways. So, but they need Diggs for Minnesota. I don't know if he'll play. Shotty was like, hopefully he'll practice this week. But I think Tyler Guyton should be ready to go for Minnesota. With concussions, you really don't know because he's a touch and go with CD. But if you don't have CeeDee Lamb for the Vikings game, you can't win that game.
Wow, there's a blanket. I like that.
Yeah, you need CeeDee Lamb because they're going to take Pickens out, right? Because
Yeah.
we just talked about that. They're going to take George out. And if you don't have CeeDee Lamb, you got Ron Flournoy, you got Jalen Tolbert, you got
Right.
Kavontae Turpin. He can't even do a fair catch right. So you got issues.
Yeah, there's no question about the.
I've never
about
seen that. Look, I've been covering football from high school, watching my kids in youth football, to the pros, colleges, and the fair catch is like the simplest thing you do. Right? Jerry on the radio on Tuesday, they asked him about Turpin. He was like, he just has to stop doing it. It's that simple. It's just. I don't need a scout to tell me what's wrong. You see the ball in the air. If you're gonna catch it and run. If you want to go fair catch, you raise your arm. It's pretty simple, right?
I think he gets up there and he's not really sure. He starts to stick his hand up. Maybe I'm going to fair catches. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. Then he just hopes that the refs don't notice. It's just, it's
I've
screwed
never
up. Well,
seen this before.
Cavante, I don't know. He's got a lot of talent, a lot of ability, but he just seems like a screw up to me. So this is an interesting time for the Cowboys. They need a. We'll see how they finish up at this point, and maybe it's the best thing if CD doesn't play. So then you really get to see about George. Is he a player or not? Can he fight back this week and show the last week? Okay, I'm sorry, my bad. Can I make up for it this week and shoulder that load? Because that's the other thing. Anybody getting paid $30 million is somebody who's drawing double coverage, right? And you got to show you can do that. If you can't do that, if you can't play through that, well, then you're not worth it. If only you're going to play well when you're in single coverage, then lots of guys can do that. But you got to be able to fight through all that. When you're a superstar, which is what that kind of money entails, then you got to play like one. Calvin, that's going to do it this week.
I just wanted to say before I go, superstars are afforded some things that other guys can't. I remember Tim Cowser told me Michael Irvin missed the team plane to a game, right? That's Michael Irvin.
Yeah.
He missed the plane to a road game. They left this behind, and he showed up and he balled out. So when you're a superstar, you can do these things.
Well, this is true. That was always the myth about Jimmy Johnson was how tough he was on everybody. He wasn't that tough on everybody. He was tough on the people that he could get away with that on. The asthma field was for a guy that was not even going to make the roster, right? But he was tough on Charles Haley. He knew how to handle Haley. But yeah, you make your examples out of people that you don't have to have, not necessarily the ones you do have to have. All right, Calvin, thanks for coming out, man. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, okay?
Yes, sir. Have a great day, guys.
You too. All right, we're going to move over now and talk about the Rangers. Evan is at the winter meetings in Orlando, and is talking to people. He's going to go hang out in the lobby later. That's what you do at the meetings. You hang out in the lobby, hoping that somebody will walk by and talk to you. Or Scott Boras comes by with a lot of puns and entertains everybody.
I missed the Scott Boras. I got the Scott Boras winter GM meetings session, but have missed the winter meetings session so that I could be here for the podcast. But I know this. When I asked Scott some questions about the Rangers at the GM meetings, he had no puns. And I went to him afterwards and I said, well, this tells me all I need to know. If you haven't worked up any material on the Rangers, they clearly aren't going to be spenders this winter.
So Evan, you've already written about a couple of things. One of them, Wyatt Langford moving to center. And you and I have talked about this before about him playing center field, and there was always a feeling that Evan Carter he's the ideal center fielder, and isn't that who you really want out there? And I know that you are campaigning for Wyatt to play there full time. I have to say that I've come to the conclusion that first of all, we have to talk about the fact that these are all interlocking pieces, right? So in right field, I'm assuming Brandon Nimmo will play over there. Is that what we think?
I think the corners can be a little bit interchangeable, and as you get them comfortable, I think that's a little bit interchangeable. I think center field right now is the part that you need to lock in, and then you can figure out, if it's Nimmo and Carter or Carter platoon on the corners, then you can work with their comfort levels about which position they feel more comfort at reading the ball. I just think that.
Hold on, before you get to that, before you get to your thought about it, I want to make this point: is that I think this is all interlocking because no matter who plays right field, they're not going to be as good as Adolis Garcia. Adolis is the quintessential to me right fielder, a great arm, and he plays the position well and fast enough. You could say that maybe they might have the same range as Adolis, but none of those guys out there has as good an arm as Adolis.
No, and look, Adolis has a great arm, and there were times, and a lot of times where it was a huge asset, and there are times when with any player you turn your asset into something of a flaw, and there were occasions where he tried to throw guys out where it was unnecessary, that other guys took bases on. There were a couple occasions this year where he showed great hustle to get to balls, and a couple occasions where he kind of made questionable decisions on balls. And so, look, he's a Gold Glove caliber right fielder, and when you lose a Gold Glove caliber right fielder, probably you're not going to get the same level of defensive play out there. It was the Rangers' decision to move on from Adolis Garcia had in no way, shape, or form anything to do with his defense. They were thrilled with the defense they got. It was all about offensive production. So they're going to sacrifice some of that defense to hopefully get more consistent offensive production and better at bats from Brandon Nimmo.
Yeah, no question about that. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying it has something to do with the makeup of your outfield. Then, and in my mind, after watching Evan Carter, and it's obviously been limited availability. I just don't. I know what the numbers say, and I do know that the numbers you showed show that Wyatt's a better center fielder, and that's certainly believable to me. I'm not thrilled with Evan Carter as a center fielder. I think he's adequate. He doesn't have a great arm. He doesn't always seem to understand what he has to do to get himself in position to make a throw from center field. Not like I said, not a bad center fielder, but I think that I like the effort and then the better arm of Wyatt Langford playing center field. We talked about comparisons with Mike Trout. If you want to make comparisons, you can make comparisons with him defensively. He's not the offensive player Mike Trout is, and will never be that. Mike Trout is a certified Hall of Famer. Wyatt Langford is going to be a very good player. I think he already has been a very good player. But he's got a better arm than Trout does, and we talk about body type and that sort of thing. And Trout played it for a long time, and I think that Wyatt Langford can do that too. So I'm on board with it, is what I'm saying. I'm saying Langford in center, Nimmo in right probably, and then probably a platoon in left field with Evan Carter. And did you have somebody else in mind, or was
Well, either they go out and sign somebody like an Austin Hayes, or then whoever is part of that platoon, whether it's Michael Hillman or Sam Haggerty, whoever's playing from the right-hand side is part of the platoon. And listen, you talked about this all being interlocking, but I think my point is that this decision needs to be about Wyatt Langford and Wyatt Langford first, because what he has done is he has established himself as the best player in their outfield. And I don't he's been he's been more durable than Carter, even with a couple of soft tissue injuries. He's been more durable than Carter. Certainly at this point in time, while the Rangers are open to Evan getting more at bats, and he showed some progress in at bats against lefties in 2025 in a very small sample size, he's still got to prove he can face lefties, and so he's going to have to prove that. And that means if you're playing him in center, then you're either got a platoon situation in center field, or you're going to do what you've done with Wyatt the last 2 years, is move him over to center when you don't have Evan Carter there. And I just think at this point, Wyatt Langford is your second best player. He deserves the ability to play one position and one position alone. And I also go to what Skip Schumacher talked about yesterday, was that center field is something of a leadership position. And you look at guys in this division who play center field, guys like Rodriguez and guys like Trouter who have played center field, and there is a leadership component there. And they are, center field is a place that draws a lot of attention. And the Rangers feel Wyatt Langford has really good leadership ability. And so I think it all just kind of works towards the solution being, give him the chance to go out there. Nobody's saying that you have to commit to this for 162 games, but give him the first opportunity to be the center fielder.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. And all those other things are fine. If the guy can't play it, he can't play it. So he can play it, and that's the difference for me. And he's going to play it every day. Obviously, center field is a more important position than left field. You want to ideally you would like to have consistency out there, and know what you're getting every day.
And
So I
look,
got no problem.
the numbers you're mentioning that I cited were from Fangraphs defensive valuations, and Langford and Carter have remarkably played about the same number of games in center field over the last 2 years. It's 53 for Carter, 50 for Langford starts, and a very similar amount of innings. And the defensive valuation has Carter a little bit behind Langford, not according to the Fangraphs people that I spoke to yesterday, significantly far behind, but it does measure Langford out as a slightly better center fielder. And on defensive runs saved in 60 fewer innings, he's got 2 more runs saved than does Carter. So the case that Wyatt is not a center fielder, that just doesn't wash. There's no excuse for him to not get that opportunity.
Well, plus there's always a thing. Look, it's a premium position, and if you can get a bonus offensive player from a premium defensive position, then you do that, right?
100%.
Because it's harder to find a left field bat. Let me say this: it's easier to find a left field bat than it is a center field bat. So
Yes.
that's another thing that makes it easier for you. So if you look at it from that standpoint, shortstop premium offensive player for the position.
You want to be strong up the middle. Shortstop and center field and catcher for the few teams that actually have a decent catcher. Those would be the spots where you want to be the strongest. Defensively,
All right.
Best all-around players.
So let's talk about the other position. It's not a premium position, but it's up the middle, and that's second base, where we feel like Josh Smith is going to get the first shot at this. I thought that in Sean McFarland's story, it brought up some interesting points about, obviously the second half fall off. We're all well aware of that with Josh. How much of that is mental? How much of it is physical? And so I have attributed it to just it's physical. Well, the middle part of it is too. Like it's a grind and it's a long season. Here we go. The Rangers seem to be making the point that he's had to play all these different positions, and that probably is wearing him down a little bit. How much of you think that is a possibility?
I think that's a little bit of it. I don't think that that's an excuse. I do think the real mental struggle is like you're establishing yourself as a player, and you get caught up. And Skip kind of addressed this a little bit yesterday. You get caught up. You got to put up numbers in this league to stay in this league, and I think in some regards, players who get off to hot starts, sometimes they try to manage those numbers, and that leads you into a downward spiral. And I think that's what has been the case with Josh a little bit. Certainly, I'm sure there's a little bit of fatigue. And, well, I say certainly, but this is all, look, it's all a narrative. Josh is a small guy. He's slightly built. He plays hard. He gets banged up a little bit. So, yeah, my assumption, I think the general assumption is he gets banged up a little bit. Is there some mental weight that comes with, hey, am I playing shortstop or am I playing third base? I think that would show up more on the defensive side than it would on the offensive side, because that's what's changing, right? That your defensive responsibilities. And there's been no issues with Josh Smith defensively. Wherever he's played above average defense. So I think, sure, it factors into it, but I think it's a rather minor percentage.
Yeah, and look, I get it, and I know we talked about the Luis Arias. That's the kind of guy I'd love for the Rangers to go after. That's not happening. And Josh Smith, if he can get his first half numbers, that's more than enough at the position, right? That would be fine for a full season. You'd like a little more pop from your second baseman than what he's going to give you. But
I think, Kevin, with the Rangers' focus this year, and really making mention of OBP, Josh Smith's Josh Smith's propensity for getting hit by pitches and being willing to take some walks, he can keep his OBP up, and you don't really have to worry that much about the batting average or the slug. The Rangers want to see guys who can be 330, 340 OBP guys, and I think Josh has the ability, whether he's mentally drained, a little bit mentally and physically fatigued or not, to kind of carry that OBP. And maybe if it's made clear to him, as I think the Rangers are, that, hey, you don't have to hit 10 home runs or 15 home runs, just worry about getting on base. I think that may be easier for him to manage too.
Yeah, it takes me back to when I asked Alex Rodriguez because we knew that John Hart didn't like Michael Young, and Michael was going to play second base, and the only genuine answer I ever got from Alex Rodriguez, which was, "Hey, the shortstop's going to hit 45 home runs. It doesn't matter how many home runs that Michael Young hits. He's going to play Gold Glove defense," and he was absolutely
That
right.
answer was all about Alex. So
Well, it kind of was, but it was a good answer, and he was absolutely right. It wasn't politics. He was disagreeing with the general manager. I thought
yeah,
that was pretty good. So I didn't have a problem with him saying that. I thought it was good. So I think that yes, because of Corey Seager, certainly makes up in power what you might lose in that. Although it was great when they had Marcus at his peak and they had Corey at his peak. That was a pretty formidable middle infield. So
yes.
you're not going to have that, but there's no use wishing on that Marcus Semien in the player he used to be, and I think that Josh overall will be an offensive upgrade. Real quickly, Evan, we need to get out of this baseball segment. The catching situation. What's the market?
Yeah, the market's not great. And I mean, I've gone through about 9 catchers, and their projected wars for next year, and guys who would be theoretically available. And the great majority of them, kind of range from about zero.6 or zero.7 war to 1.1 war in projections. So there's not a wide variety. And what my point here is, I think it behooves the Rangers here to take a number for these free agents and say, here, Danny Jansen, here, Victor Caratini, here's our offer. The first one to take it, that's your guy. Or if they're on the trade market, you can identify which prospects you are willing to trade, make it very clear there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there, and go to teams in the first team to say, let's talk about this and get this done. You accept that. I don't think there's a great I guess what I'm saying is there's not a great significant pecking order after JT Realmuto, and the Rangers aren't going to be big players on Realmuto. So you have the ability to not massage things very much. You have the ability to be pretty firm. Here's our financial offer. Here's our trade offer. Give us who's going to agree to that.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's gonna be hard for the Rangers because I'm looking at the Mariners now. We always talked about how we don't believe in the Mariners. No, we'll wait for them to win. Well, they've won now, and they've got a great farm system. They just went out and got themselves probably their closer. They had good pitching already. The Mariners they're really good, and they're going to be really good. And the Rangers are going to be struggling uphill, so it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do going forward. And we'll talk more about all of that, obviously, in the offseason here. It's a great the old hot stove league. You can't beat anything
But we
like
got
that.
to get to college football, Kevin.
We
We got
got
a
to get
lot
to college
to talk.
football. Oh my gosh,
Well,
unbelievable.
before we get to college football, give me just 1 minute here to say on the passing of Tom Hicks, the Rangers owner from 1998 to 2010, and the Stars owner for a little bit longer than that. I think a lot of people just remember that Tom's sports empire went bankrupt at the end, and that's a bad memory. But I look back on things, and this was a guy who had big ambitions and big dreams. And look, brought the Stanley Cup to Dallas. That was the first championship other than the Cowboys for any pro sports team in Dallas. Um, Tried to put the Rangers on the same spending plane with the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox. That unfortunately didn't work out. But I think I hope Tom's legacy as an owner goes down as somebody who was a positive asset to the community. I'd hate for him to simply be remembered as a guy who went bankrupt.
Oh, absolutely. And they got a little testy at times between me and Tom over those things. But I overlook all that kind of stuff. That doesn't mean anything. I thought the two things that struck me about Tom, and all the things you said are absolutely correct. But the two things personally in my conversations with him over the years, and I had conversations with him. What an issue! What a thing about having
I,
conversations with the owner of the baseball team. At any rate, the two things that stuck out to me was one, he told me once if he had owned the Rangers in the early '90s, the Rangers would be playing baseball in Dallas, not in
yes.
Arlington. And that should not go. I mean, I don't. There's no reason for me to disbelieve him when he says that because of the second thing I'm going to bring up, which was the reason he moved the Double-A team from Tulsa to Frisco was to service baseball in Collin County and in North Dallas for those people. He thought, our fan base is all in Collin County the season ticket holders, all in Collin County and in Dallas. Everybody thinks it's a two-city team. It's not. Fort Worth does not support the Rangers like Dallas and Collin County does. And he felt like we needed to service those people who drive all the way out to the ballpark. If they want to watch baseball, they can do it there. That was genius to me, moving that team there and doing that. And if he could have, how great would it be if the ballpark was in Dallas? I mean, not just because I live here, it's just better in an urban environment.
And look, he was a pioneer in that regard. You look at teams in their upper level affiliates now, and so many of them are in suburbs. The Braves AAA team is in Gwinnett County, which is essentially Frisco. That's the first one that comes to mind. There are a number of others in the same way, and it does serve your fan base in some of the suburbs or the outlying communities to get to know those players and to form bonds and to get the product for a whole lot less and less commute time. So I think at the time that it happened, we were all kind of scratching our heads a little bit. Like, are you taking fans away from the Rangers? And I don't think that's happened at all.
No, absolutely not. It's a different market, and it's just fun. It's a fun thing for people to go do and just to see baseball. So here's to Tom. So we're going to move over now to talk about colleges. It was a crazy weekend, Evan. A lot of crazy stuff happened. I had conversation with some of my pals. I was in New York, took the weekend off, went up to see my brother-in-law's another Field and Supply. This one in the city, his very first one. Lots of fun. If you look really closely in a video or a TikTok that Al Roker, or is on Instagram, that's what it was, Instagram by Al Roker, you can see me in the background. I'm texting at the time.
I'll be looking.
I was conducting high level business. At any rate, so we get the CFP, right, and all kinds of gnashing of teeth on this. And I have to say, in the one that I did for the Dallas Morning News, I did not see the committee dropping Notre Dame out. In the one that I did, I had Alabama dropping out because of the third loss. And one of their losses was to Florida State. Not a good loss. Just like the Texas loss to Florida was not a good loss. So I had them dropping out, and I had Miami moving up. And in mine, I actually moved Notre Dame up one and put Miami behind them. And you could say that doesn't make any sense because Miami beat Notre Dame. But here was my issue, just like it was in 2014 with the committee, where they had TCU ranked third. And then after a 52-point win, they dropped them like what? 5 spaces, 3, 4, 5, something like that spaces.
Dropped them to 5, I think, because it was still a 14 playoff at that point.
Yes. Well, they dropped them out. It's like, how do you drop after doing nothing or after winning by 52 points?
Okay, so 2 things here, Kevin. The number one, to your point, I think nobody would have much of an argument if the committee had factored in the Miami Notre Dame thing, the head-to-head issue, a week earlier, because at that point,
or 2 weeks earlier, or 3 weeks earlier, you can't leave Notre Dame. I listen. You can question Notre Dame's, eligibility for this. I mean, look, they don't play a tough schedule. It's not like the Notre Dame of old, the schedules of old, where they would go around and knock off all these great powers. They didn't play anybody tough, and they lost to Miami. But you cannot say, well, the head-to-head with Miami. It's like, well, why didn't it work last week and the week before that?
Look, I think that was a big mistake on the committee's part, but I think also the committee at that point in time was saying, well, but Notre Dame has been the hotter team of late than Miami. So this is the issue that you get into. There's always a second rationale, and so I think that in retrospect, like the committee's ultimate rationale looked bad all those weeks because the head-to-head should have mattered when they were matched so closely. Now, to the other question here about Alabama being in, and what an SEC elitist I am, over Notre Dame, my argument to this would be, we can talk about Notre Dame all we want, and we can say that Alabama should be out, but if there's anybody in my mind that has an argument about being in over Alabama, it's BYU rather than Notre Dame. BYU has an extra win. It played in a conference championship game. Its 2 losses were to the same team, which were both ranked higher than the 2 losses Notre Dame had, and their strength of schedule was higher. So if Notre Dame wants to make an argument, that's great, but I don't see how their argument holds weight against what BYU did in that regard.
No, I think you're right, and I will say there's some really weird things going on here, and I didn't realize this until I was reading it yesterday in the complaint from the Notre Dame AD when he was talking about the ACC. And of course, they have the football affiliation with the ACC, right? But in their conference messaging, they were saying that Miami should be in over Notre Dame, and it's like it would be like the Big 12 saying, "Yeah, we want Tech in over BYU." It's like the conference can't do that. But you're not a full-fledged member, so I kind of get the whole deal. But still, that's just crazy, And
The
I
whole
think
Notre Dame situation is crazy at this point in time. Okay, they have this rigged up deal with the ACC where they compete in all these other sports where their brand is big, but not big enough to carry as much weight as they'd like. But in football, they want all the money without having the full conference affiliation. They don't play that 13th game, so they don't have that data point. And my argument to Bavacqua and the Notre Dame fans is simply this: join a conference, play a conference schedule, share the money, and get an easier route to the postseason. The other stuff is all just eyewash to me. He can cry about the ACC's social team messaging all he wants. That isn't what knocked Notre Dame out of the playoffs. Losing to Miami is what knocked Notre Dame.
Absolutely not. But I think what did knock Notre Dame out of the playoffs was the fact that that the ACC didn't have anybody else that was worth taking other than Miami. Right?
And the ACC made a mistake too. I think that all leagues should learn from this now, right? You have more than a 2-team tie for a championship game. If you have 3 or more teams tied for the championship for a championship game berth, you give the berth to the highest ranked team in the CFP.
That's probably not a bad idea because that's the thing.
Miami instead of Duke in that championship game.
Yeah, Virginia's lost to Duke, knocks Virginia out as the automatic qualifier. Virginia would have been a higher ranked team. Miami would not have gotten. I'm convinced Miami would not have gotten in if Virginia had won because the ACC would have had a team in. That would have been their argument. They would have left Notre Dame in. That's what was bogus about it. Was we got to get the ACC in. We can't skunk the ACC. Well, they could have. It wasn't a good league this year. I think that Miami's a good team. But we know all about Miami. We saw them when they lost to SMU. So at least SMU has that going for it. All right, let's talk about the local teams real quick. We have to get this stuff in. So Texas Tech.
Just one last point, 15 seconds, very quickly, and all the other arguments. I'm tired of hearing people talk about JMU and Tulane not belonging. The CFP is stacked against the Group of 5 conferences. It is not the Group of 5 conferences teams' problem that they met all of those stacked criteria this one time to actually allow themselves 2 teams who did nothing but win on their schedule in. So I don't buy any of those criticisms.
Well, Nick Saban will argue with you about that. But the thing is to me, it's like, why does Nick Saban care? Because I obviously he cares about it because of Alabama, because Alabama was right there on the edge when Alabama was one of the top 4 teams. I'm sure Nick Saban never wanted to get past 4 teams. He never wanted to get past a 2-team playoff.
If Nick Saban was coaching and Alabama was the number 5 seed, he'd be all for JMU being the number 12 seed.
Well, exactly. So yeah, I think it's a legitimate point. I think when it goes to 16 teams, it's much easier to do, right? To have the 5 conference champs getting in. I don't really have a strong feeling about it either way. Because of exactly what's going to happen here in the next few weeks. All right, so let's talk about that. So there's a lot of consternation among the Aggies. Billy Lucci of Texags went out and called it. What did he call the committee? Trash, disgusting trash, because they had the Aggies 7th. It's like, that's disgusting trash. I mean, I guess because he felt like they're on the wrong side of the bracket here. But look, the thing is, they get all right. So they're going to play Miami in College Station in a couple of weeks, right? If they're who they are, then they should beat Miami. I don't think that should be an issue. And then if they win that game, They get to play in the Cotton Bowl. And, you'll have to play Ohio State, but still, you're in the Cotton Bowl. That's a home game for you.
Yeah, I don't see
So
how I don't see how A&M could be any higher.
no, I don't think so either. I don't
And
think so either. Their record was not that strong. They beat a team. Their big win was against a team that everybody's now questioning that dropped out of the playoffs. So that really hurt them. So I think that if you're on board with Notre Dame dropping, well, then you got to be okay with the fact that A&M drops to 7. I thought there was a possibility they could have dropped to 8. So I think 7 was fine. You look at the teams ahead of them. Ohio State and Indiana. Right now, they deserve to be 1 and 2. I thought they both played great. That was a great championship game.
I thought Georgia should have been the 2 seed after that, but I get it. I get it. I will say this: if Indiana,
it's 1 and 2 playing, and they lose, and it's a close loss, and they stay 1 and 2.
I'm okay
that's
with that.
Fine. Yeah. So Tech's going to play. Obviously, they get the sit out here, and then they're going to play in the Orange Bowl. I think that Tech is really playing well. Like as you noted earlier, BYU's a good team, and they just stuffed BYU twice. The Red Raiders are a really good team all the way around. They're good defensively, and they're good offensively. I give them a great shot.
The thing for me that was so impressive about Texas Tech is, in this championship game, they come out and BYU takes the ball and goes 90 yards in 14 plays, an absolutely methodical drive, their first possession of the game to take a lead, and nothing else. The defense stuffed them shut, made adjustments on the spot and stuffed them and basically shut them out. Texas Tech is a dangerous team. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, they really are. I like their chances better than the Aggies' chances, and not because of the bracket or anything. Look, I don't see that there's any dominant team in this bracket. Now, they may turn out that way, but I could see anybody winning in these games. We saw that when Indiana beat Ohio State. I don't know that people really thought that Indiana was better than Ohio State. I think everybody thought that was the number 1 team in the nation. Well, they weren't. Indiana outplayed them. I got to say this too. Curt Cignetti, man. He's an odd duck. I've just never seen him talk that much. He's a weird dude, but he
listen,
wins.
I think you can take the top 3 seeds and you say they're kind of on one tier. I think Tech is right there. I think the only thing that kind of works against Tech a little bit is their strength of schedule that makes making everybody a real believer. And then after that, I think you can basically. You could anybody between 5 and I'm not gonna throw out the group of 5 schools. I think it's wide open there. I do think you raise a great point though. Do you think right now, as of today, is Texas A&M or Oklahoma the better team?
Well, right now, you get the problem for me with Oklahoma. You're not getting quality play from the quarterback, so they're not good offensively. They are really good defensively, and that's what's carrying them right now. And that can carry you to a certain extent. If you're only going to be good on one side of the ball, I'd rather be good defensively. But yeah, A&M is better all around. I think Marcel Reed did not play well in that loss to Texas. He just got happy feet. If they could just get him to come, I thought in that game. We talked all year long about Arch Manning. How good is he? Well, he was a better player in that game than Marcel Reed was. So, and I think that Marcel Reed was getting lots of Heisman talk at one point in the season. So I don't think that. I think that and Reed is better than John Mateer. There's no question about that. So, and A&M has better skilled people. I was surprised that their skilled people didn't turn up bigger in the game against Texas. Texas did a really good job of shutting them down. Casey Concepcion.
I'll just say that halfway through the season, I thought there was no way that Oklahoma made. I thought there was a possibility Brent Venables ends up not being employed at the end of the year.
Oh, no question about it.
Hosting a playoff game.
Well, no question about it, and because the first 3 or 4 games, right? Everybody's thinking Mateer's oh my gosh, he's the front runner for the Heisman. He just looks like Johnny Manziel out there. And then against Texas, he comes back probably before he's really ready because of the thumb, and he looked terrible. And then kind of really struggled off and on since then. He just hasn't been consistent, and I just don't think you can count on him to be a real threat. But it'll be very interesting to see how this all goes right now. If I'm, going to say right now who's advancing, to the, let's just say, to the semifinals. I'm putting Tech in the semifinals from the locals. I don't have the Aggies making it, and I don't have Oklahoma making it either. So I think that Tech would be the team representing the area in that Final Four.
I think you take a page pretty much. I think the top 4 seeds are all going to be in the semifinals.
Yeah, could be. It could be, but I wouldn't be surprised at all by upsets at this point, if they're going to be upsets, if that's what you're going to actually call them, because of it's just college football is more wide open now than it's been. It was last year, it is this year. I guess the top teams were still really great last year.
It is, but Georgia was the big first round upset last year, or the big quarterfinal upset last year to Notre Dame. But they were going in with no quarterback, and they were really hurt. This year they're going into it with a defense that has come eons since the start of the season. Their offensive line, which has been beaten down, has a chance to get healthy, and they took Alabama apart. And I know Alabama has not played great down the stretch, but they took Alabama apart in the SEC championship game. So I don't think they're going to get upset this year.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not sure how this is going to go. It'll be fun though. It was a fun college football season last year. We talk about that all the time. The tournament was not so great. It wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. I thought the tournament was fine last year. It got better as it went along. I would expect it to be really good this year. I just don't see any blowouts coming necessarily. Doesn't mean it won't happen. I just don't see that. I think that the group of 5.
All I keep coming back to is this, Kevin. From my perspective, college football, with all the troubles it has, and there are plenty of them, and the NIL stuff and the transfer portal all create some issues. As a whole, now I'm not saying the play is better, but it is a more entertaining landscape than the NFL, and I don't think it's very close at this point in time. I do not.
Just all of it. For everything, for all the consternation about the coaches moving, and they've got to change that. They're going to have to make it where the transfer portal, the signing period, all that stuff has to come after the playoffs. It's just ridiculous now as it is.
Sure.
Where you have coaches leaving in the middle of these things. That's just.
But the product is just far more entertaining than the NFL.
Well, look, anybody would tell you that. Anybody who's in the entertainment business. It's drawing eyeballs, all this talk about Lane Kiffin, name me another figure in football, NFL, anywhere who was a bigger draw because of what was going on in the drama around him than Lane Kiffin.
Yeah. I mean, it took over the entire sports landscape. And,
yeah,
I will say this too, what ESPN has done with Game Day has made it the one must watch football pregame show, NFL, college, whatever. It's just entertaining and it's interesting, and they've got good chemistry. So the whole landscape for me is just a more entertaining, enjoyable thing to watch than is the NFL.
So we're going to have to move on, but we'll be back next week and we'll have a little bit more about what's going on, certainly with the Rangers and the Cowboys, maybe not so much in the college landscape, but we'll talk about it anyway. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.